Illinois spring game. Ryan, we do have a question for you, but we'll give you the floor first. Just give us the highlights of what went on in the spring game, kind of recap it for us a little bit, and then we'll have some time to ask you some questions, and you'll be able to respond from there. So, Ryan, take it away.
All right. Well, they did not keep score, which, Bielema is kind of different with that kind of stuff, how he goes about his business with the scrimmages and all that. So no score, but they had some very contributors who sat out. So it's a spring game. You always kind of take it with a grain of salt. But to me, I was looking at like some of the transfer portal additions just to kind of see how they were kind of meshing and fitting in. And Illinois really beefed up and added on their offensive line. Obviously, a Bielema thing. He does have big lines, and they do look more like his Wisconsin lines now. But the biggest problem with last year was they didn't have much depth. Well, he's fixed that. They went out and got two or three really good offensive line transfers. J.C. Davis was like the first or second ranked offensive line transfer in the country, and they grabbed him from New Mexico. And so the offensive line looked really well. You can just see that they had that second team offensive line were a couple guys who were starting last year. So those guys are not starting anymore. They've got some good young guys who were depth pieces last year who got a lot of reps that they really shouldn't have because of injury. So that looks really good. So I'm hopeful that the offensive line is going to be a lot better than it was last year, which Luke Altmaier, their starting quarterback, his biggest problem, which he had a very good season, very good year. His worst game was against Penn State, which I'm sure many guys have some bad games against Penn State, but it was just their offensive line couldn't keep him upright. So Luke Altmaier definitely had a lot of time to throw the ball. I know it's against the second team defense, but Luke Altmaier looked good. I think they're actually wanting him to maybe scramble a little bit more this year and use his legs even more than he did last year. I know some people don't like that, but he was very effective with his feet last year. Barry Lunny and the offense, obviously high octane with Altmaier and aforementioned John Paddock. Put up a lot of points, didn't matter who the quarterback was. Illinois had a top tier Big Ten offense. I think they were the fourth or fifth ranked Big Ten offense. So, I know that's probably hard to believe for some people, but it is true. And Luke Altmaier was a big part of that. But Caden Feagin, who's just a stud, like 6'3", 240 pounds, running back, had a breakout, second half of the season, and he did not play in the spring game. So I was kind of looking forward to seeing that. But we saw veterans Josh McCray and then Aiden Lawfrey, who those guys are going to get a bunch of carries. Fagan's going to be the guy. He's an NFL back. He's just tough. He's hard nosed. And he reminds you a lot of. He's like a mixture of like John Clay, Ron Dane. But he's a little bit more athletic than Ron Dane. He's just a big back. So you could just see the Wisconsin type of formula that Bielema is using with his line and running backs. But anyway, Lawfrey had a really good game because Feagin didn't play. We got to see some emergence of some really good young wide receivers who Illinois is now going to implore more from, because you lose Isaiah Williams, who I think is going to get drafted here this weekend. I think he's got a really good chance to go in maybe the 6th or 7th round. He was all Big Ten first team with Marvin Harrison. You're losing a lot with Isaiah Williams, a very dynamic wideout. Caught the game-winning touchdown against Sammy's Hoosiers in overtime. But yeah, he's dynamic. I think you guys know that. But then they lost. Casey
Apparently, we didn't.
Yeah, Paddock was. I think the pizza guy was open all. But anyway, Paddock found everybody. AC Washington left is gone as well. A very, very good possession receiver, along with Tip Ryman, a very good tight end who's going to get drafted. So they have Kenari Wilcher and Malik Elzy. So Malik Elzy was a 4-star commit out of Chicago who was very coveted. Notre Dame was wanting him. Wisconsin wanted him really bad, but he ended up choosing Illinois and stayed home. He had his ups and downs last year. He had some drop issues. That's why he played more than 5 games. People were thinking he might transfer. But yeah, so Malik Elzy's a guy they're going to be looking for a lot of production. Kenari Wilcher's another young wide receiver that the team is going to be depending on. He's dangerous in the kick returning game as well. And they added a FCS All-American from Murray State, Cole Rusk. So he's from the Quad Cities area, and that's who they're going to be replacing Tip Ryman with. So it's not just going to be bare there at the tight end. They still have some quality pieces there. The tight ends utilized quite a bit in Barry Lunney's offense. So that's offensively. Backup quarterback. The big key too is who's going to be the backup at ball down. Donovan Leary's a guy who's been in the program 3 years, and I think this is his put up or shut up year. If he's not getting to play a lot this year, I don't think you're going to get to see him after this year. I don't think no quarterback wants to be a 4-year guy who never got to play ever, especially in this day and age. But Donovan Leary threw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. He looked really good. I think that people were thinking that this is the guy he could be. And if some of you are wondering, yes, that's Devin Leary's brother. So Donovan Leary, they're from New Jersey. He's a guy that most Illini fans thought could be the guy down the road before they went and got Luke Altmaier from Ole Miss. So offensively, things I think most people feel pretty confident with what can go down, what this team can be again, as long as they're healthy. So it's really more defensively. I got to add Pat Bryant too. I think Pat Bryant could.
He's a stud.
Yeah, I can't. And Pat Bryant was hurt in that Indiana game, so Pat Bryant is their best wide receiver. So got to mention him. Love Pat Bryant, great player out of Jacksonville area in Florida. So he's a stud, as Sammy said. Now defensively, that's the big problem last year for Illinois. Should have been a 7 or 8 win team in my opinion, but had maybe the worst defense in the Big Ten. So that really halted and put a stop to their a bowl game for them. When you gave up near 50 points to Northwestern in the final game of the year, easily could have lost to Indiana the week before that. So it's thinking, you're giving up near 40 points a game. And so what needs to be done there? So second year defensive coordinator Aaron Henry, they made some adjustments. They added some new coaching pieces to try to help him navigate this, play calling situation because, it was his first year as a defensive coordinator. He got promoted from defensive backs coach. So Aaron Henry, struggled there some. It was when Ryan Walters went to Purdue, he took Kevin Kane with him. He took, some other key guys inside that staff that I think Aaron Henry was real close with. And they fired defensive backs coach Antonio Finellis. And so they're hoping that maybe some of these young defensive backs can show up this year. Unfortunately, they didn't last year. Some key pieces now into the defense would be Tyler Strain and Xavier Scott. Xavier Scott did not play in the spring game, who I think is their best defensive back. He didn't play. Matthew Bailey did not play, who was, I think, their best defensive player. He missed all of last season with a separated shoulder. He had to have surgery on in the Penn State game in week 3. So it's like you're seeing, what do you take away from this when, a lot of your key players did not play in it? It was more of what do they have depth wise? So what I did see is I think the defensive line and the edge is where Illinois' strong suit's going to be. They got Seth Coleman to come back, which was huge, which is a guy who I think if he would have tested in the pro day would have been a guy that could have got drafted. Seth Coleman's really good. Then they bring Gabe Jacobs back, who's going to be an NFL player as well. Just the intangibles, their size and speed of these guys. Jacobs, guy that Tennessee wanted. So I think that's where the depth's going to be. They showed pretty well the first team defense against the second team offense, but still they look pretty stout. The D line and the edge rushers. I think that's where Illinois' strength's going to be. To me, it's can these cornerbacks, can these safeties, do enough, and even just to be an average defense. I think that's all really Illinois' Bret Bielema is asking. You can't be the worst in the league. I think if Illinois was an average defense last year, I think if they were the 8th best defense or the 9th best defense last year, Illinois has 7 wins. So, I think you just got to take a step up at least for this season. And, they've got a nice younger linebacking core, Dylan Rosiak and James Kreutz, Olin Kreutz's son is, they're young and they're fast, and it's more about them just getting these game reps in, a lot more of Kreutz. So that's what I saw. No score. It was, a lot of throwing the ball around with Lunny, and more of just seeing the young guy try to get some reps in and get some confidence heading into summer ball.
Very good. Yeah. Brad was in here early and asked this question that I was actually was going to be similar to my question. He says, Ryan, should we be concerned that a lot of Illinois defensive backs are entering the portal? To me, that's kind of the key for this Illinois defense this year, is to have a better secondary than they had last year, which was not their best, but hopefully under some new defensive leadership, they're able to look better. Ryan, do you have concern with defensive backs entering the portal?
Yeah, to a degree. I think Zachary Toby's the biggest one that was a shock because he started a lot at the end of the year. I think he was going to get moved to safety, and he didn't like that very well. So I think he didn't like it well, and nowadays that's how it works. If we don't like something, I'm going to leave. So he's going to go somewhere where he can play defensive back. He doesn't want to play safety. I think I heard it was a huge shock to Aaron Henry that he left. Elijah McCantos, not really. In the 3 or 4 years he was in the program, he really only played a lot last year because he had to, because of injury. And yes, it does bother me some, but the transfer portal is always available. It's both ways now. Bret Bielema
and transfer portal giveth and it taketh away as well.
They'll grab some guys, some experienced guys, and I think with the coaching additions, I think it can work out in Illinois' favor. But yeah, I mean, it's always bothersome to a team. I'm sure Sam or you would be worried if you had a couple guys that you were counting on to decide to dip on you last minute. So sorry to take all your time, Sammy.
You're all right.
No, for sure. Zach, before we move to IU, do you have any thoughts on Illinois or anything you want to reference with Ryan?
Well, I was reading the Daily Illini. It was mentioning that maybe a defensive back who might be able to bolster the depth in that room was Sabor Kariem.
Yep,
he's a sophomore corner. Just talk a little bit more about him and what you saw.
Yeah, so he's on the second team right now. He got put into action again last year because of injuries, and Taz Nicholson didn't perform like Illinois was wanting. He was their veteran presence, left from a very good secondary that had 3 guys drafted. He had a disappointing year, so they had to put some younger guys in, and trial by fire hurt him a lot. I think it hurt his confidence some, but right now he's on the second team. Vince, he's a hell of a lacrosse player too, I got to tell you. He was an all-state lacrosse player in the state of New Jersey, and just happened to be a hell of a track athlete and a very good football player. But yes, Sabur Kariem can be a guy that I think when you see guys like Zachary Toby leave, and just had Elijah McCantos and Prince Ford hit the portal, that he's going to be a guy that they're going to challenge this summer. I guarantee it. Let's see what you got, man. Like, the depth chart just opened up a little bit for you.
I love it. Yeah, Sabor was one that I was wondering about as well, so I'm glad you asked that, Zach. Sammy, before we move on to IU, you have any questions or anything you want to reference with Ryan about Illinois before we move on?
Nah, we don't have to see him for another 5 years. So
True.
Sounds
Hey,
good.
but with your new coach, and my own question will come to you, with his confidence level, I think that's probably a good thing for us, though.